Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tell me, who is Stef Sword-Williams?
She is an eternal optimist, a cheerleader, a champion, and a change maker.
I love that. Where did that all begin? What were the who and why influences that have got you to where you are now?
So I have always been a creative person, but I grew up in quite an academic family. So I always felt this feeling that maybe I wasn't enough in certain areas, or I wasn't going to be smart enough, or I wasn't going to pass the tests enough. Or that enoughness has always been quite omnipresent in my life. And going down a creative route, which no one in my family had really explored before or knew much about, was obviously an element of rebelling, but also just following my curiosity and what really brings me joy. So, right from the outset, I knew communication, creativity, and change was something I really cared about. And I actually went to study fashion communication and promotion, which was just a bunch of fashion girls try to be fashionable. It was like 3 years of The Apprentice.
Sounds
So you'd
fun.
get live briefs and you'd have 3 days to come up with a new campaign for Boots, and then you'd be pitching it to Boots head office 3 days later. So it was really on the job kind of learning experience. We did a whole semester on self promotion, and it definitely taught me about the need for promoting and marketing and advertising. And I kind of fell in love with the idea of working at ad agencies. And that was the journey into wanting to turn the characteristics that I knew and loved about myself into a professional career of being a storyteller.
I love that because there's a personal experience and journey. This also led to you probably realizing a lot of other people were looking for that as well, and probably feeling constrained by societal kind of pressure to go academic route.
Yeah, and I'm originally from Leeds. And, in Leeds, you don't hear that much about Forbes under 30 winners or public speakers or people who have got no academic background going to write 2 books. So it was as much about the role modeling or their lack of at the time that I didn't always feel I had that creative environment set up for me from the outset. And so going to find those rooms in which I fit in, which I felt I could be authentic, which I could show up and actually not only enjoy life, but also like find a career that meant something to me, I realized quite quickly that I couldn't settle on the environment I was in. And I had to keep moving until I found the spaces that really brought out the best in both my professional and personal career.
I love that. And a lot of what you did is entrepreneurial, but did you still have to break through kind of the glass ceiling scenario? Making a change maker always has resistance. And because you're female and there's this sort of resistance against entrepreneurship, have you felt you've had to push harder?
Yeah, I mean, I run a business called F Being Humble. So naturally, I have had to push harder. I have been met with resistance and discussed by some people in the first instance of meeting him. Well, I believe in being humble, so I'm going to end this conversation, is what someone said to me once. So I've absolutely been met with that friction just by creating a business with a provocative title, let alone the fact that when you're pitching yourself for jobs and you know that men are getting paid double what you're getting paid, or this person got paid triple, and you can't always understand why that is. It's not necessarily your fault, it's a systemic issue, but that's ultimately why my brand name and my movement that I've created is so needed. And for me, everything I do is, how do I embody the message I'm sharing? So one of the reasons I have been able to be successful with my brand is because I have to self promote. Like, I have to show people how it's done. And that has meant, probably more so than others, I have been able to break down doors, and not break down doors, knock down doors,
Smash them.
smash the doors, and either create a better future for myself, but the hope is leaving those doors open for other women to follow through, and minority groups to be able to access opportunities, which is why so much of my work is, obviously, I deliver talks and training at corporate businesses to develop their staff. But so much of my work has always been community based. It's always been creating accessible learning, accessible training, resources, so that, I'm a strong believer that I don't think access should be a reason that people can't get the support they need. And so, I've always had a bit of a Robin Hood theory, which is, take from the rich and give to the poor. And that's why I do the great work that I do with businesses. And I love the transformation and the work that I do. But the part that has always lit me up is being able to leave that door open or create more opportunities, uplift and inspire. I've started working with a business coach recently, and she sort of asked me what my superpower was. And I was like, oh, it's public speaking. Like, that's obviously. And she's like, I don't think it is. And we kind of landed on it recently, is that I make people believe in themselves. And that's actually just a really powerful thing that I hadn't been recognizing is the reason that I can light up rooms and create inspiration and make people feel like something's possible. That's the superpower I think that I have that I maybe only just recently realized in the 7th year of running my business. I knew I could make people feel seen and celebrated, but the real underneath core is making people feel like there's a belief and there's a future for them.
But I'm leading by example, which makes you a role model. And you used that word earlier. And just talking briefly off camera, I mentioned I've got two teenage daughters. So you smashing through these doors, paving a way for girls coming through and being so visible and so with it is powerful. And you've got so much energy when you talk with us. So the kind of journey you've gone on to be doing what you're doing, is there a sort of destination? Because I can see in your eyes you're fulfilled, you're full of purpose, and you're realizing even recently that you're instilling belief into other people. But have you got somewhere you want to get to and a change you really want to make happen?
So when I wrote my first book, I read the book The Dream Manager, and if anyone's read it, it's a beautiful book where this company is struggling to retain its staff. And what they think is happening is that they just want to leave because they're not getting paid promotions, getting higher salaries, all of those things. But when they actually speak to the people that are leaving the company, they say, I just don't believe my dream's going to come true. And it was things like learning to drive, buying their first house, giving their kids the Christmases they deserve. And so what the company did was hire a dream manager, and it was essentially a financial advisor where they sat with employees and they said, how can we make your dreams come true and keep you here and help that? So that meant for some people who wanted to learn how to drive, they'd get a Wednesday afternoon off to go learn to drive because they were reaching their goals at the company. And I remember reading the story. It's actually fictional, but businesses have taken it on, and there are businesses around the world that have a dream manager to help create that change whilst also retaining their best talent. And I remember reading it thinking, God, we don't really get asked what our dreams are that much. Definitely about 7 years ago when I was asked it. And, when I was younger, I used to say I wanted to be a ballerina, and then it was an artist, but you don't get rich until you're dead. And, all of those silly things that you hear. And I remember writing down what are my 3 core dreams right now. And it was public speak to inspire. I always loved the idea of being a TED speaker and thinking that I had something of such value that was worth being put on a stage that people could really learn from. I wanted to create communications that could change the world, and I wanted to travel. Any opportunity where I got the chance to travel. And for me, every time I moved jobs in the advertising industry, it was because I was really yearning for that purpose-led work. And every time it just sadly, in the advertising industry, 95% of it is not so great, and 5% of it might be purposeful. But often you are selling things people don't need, and there was something quite jarring with my identity doing that.
Lack of purpose.
Yeah, and I felt like if I really wanted to make significant change, I needed to create a brand myself and a movement that I could do that through, that didn't have red tape around it, that was unapologetically me and was really born on an insight that so many people struggle with. So when I think about where I'm going and what I wanted it to be, what I feel like I've done is public speak to inspire. I have traveled, I've had great times, and the final chapter that is still kind of a little bit unread or not developed yet is that changing world changing communications. And so I'm actually about to launch a new studio called Legacy Studio where we donate a portion of Humble's profits towards tackling global problems.
Wow. So this whole mission-led thing behind this as well.
Yeah,
And
so
it's so
that's the
into what
idea.
your personal ambitions, if you like. And I'm going to come on to that. Actually, that's a good word to go into the whole humble thing, right? Your ambition benefits so many other people. So you're getting fulfillment out of what you do every day that then actually builds other people's self-belief and confidence. That's proper mission led.
There's a really brilliant book called Moral Ambition that's recently been written, and I listened to it, and the author very rightly says, if you weren't a key worker in lockdown, your job's irrelevant. And it's a hard one to hear, but actually it's true. If a marketing department fell down tomorrow, the world would go on, people would go on without me whilst I know I'm leaving a great legacy. And the book just kind of crystallizes that we spend a lot of time pouring into things that aren't serving people, communities, tackling big issues. And for me personally, I feel a heavy weight to be relying on the institutions who are not doing the right things and not spending where they should. And what I know I have is a connection with brands because they've been working with me for the last 7 years. And I want to now go to them and say, let's go tackle some global problems. Let's seriously try and work on this because I believe brand marketers, leaders, CMOs, I think they have the great potential and they want to create change. I just think we've lost our way through the pandemic where people are so worried about losing their jobs. They're worried about the industry, the scarcity mindset, that we're not being brave enough. And if there's one thing that I've been throughout my career and the one thing that I've embodied always is bravery and courage. And that is really now what I want to start speaking to brands about is how can you be brave? Instead of that budget you're going to spend on making a CGI floating perfume bottle, how could you actually funnel that into tackling helping young children from deprived areas in the summer holidays when we know they need resource and support? So really, I think, we tapped on it earlier, but I don't really see limits. I'm quite like, why not? Why not me? Why not you? Why not them? I'm quite open to have that, push those buttons and to have that open dialogue and just make people think bigger. Because so much of it, people just get drilled down and taken over by doing the do, that they don't look up and go, what's the bigger picture?
And does that tap in nicely to the whole, we were talking about it briefly off camera, this whole almost like a very British thing to not champion success, to not big yourself up, and in a very non-arrogant way. You are right now. I'm sort of doing what I'm doing, and I'm making a difference, and I'm making change. But you're doing it from a place of passion and a place of sort of purpose. But what is this that sort of seems to be a very British thing where people put themselves down? The press is so negative. Whereas you mentioned you just come back from New York and the sort of the time you spent there, everyone's positive. Everyone gets behind people if they're being successful. And how do you change that?
Yeah, it's something I'm obviously really passionate about. I always laugh now saying, should I have just started my business in the US? Because I would have been flying. Half my conversations over the last 7 years is, here's why we need to self promote. Like, first, let me convince you of that. And then the second half is, now I want you to F being humble. Like it's two big asks. I've been trying to single handedly challenge an entire nation's culture and conditioning. One of the things that I love when I go to New York is what we would call delusional confidence. But it is this, I'm going to make it. I know I'm going to make it. And come along with me for the ride. It's this very like invitational, very open, very transparent, very honest, very ambitious, but they vocalize their dreams. They vocalize their goals. They vocalize their ambitions because they know more people who know are more likely to help them.
Yeah,
What
share it.
we what we do is minimize it, don't talk about it, resent anybody that gets what we want. It's a really sad conditioning. And I would love, that was why I entered the market with such a disruptive message. Because if I'd have just said shoot for the stars or self promote now, nobody would have been interested. It needed a shake up. Like we needed to go, hold on a minute, is this working? And when I did my TEDx talk, one of the things that I said was the saying, if you work hard, you will go far, is massively flawed. Because how many people do we know that have worked really hard and haven't gone far? And I believe it's because they're not talking about the 50% of the story, which is they're telling the story of how hard you've worked. Like anybody who knows, I had a call yesterday with someone who said, yeah, I just know so many founders who don't want to self promote. And I was like, then don't start a business. Seriously, because you cannot start a business if you're not willing to talk to it about it to anyone and everyone. That is so important
To keep up.
to keep up with it. And I think we have to resist or at least question, is it serving us to be humble in all instances? It's not to say it's not a good idea. If you said to me after you were a great guest, I'm not going to be like, I know. At that point, I'd be modest, I'd be gracious, and I'd be like, thank you so much. It means a lot to hear that from you.
It's the difference between arrogance, isn't it?
But the next time I was on a podcast pitch call, I'd be like, oh, well, I was recently on a podcast and I got called a great guest. So that's what you should know about me. So it's really about dialing up and down when we want to be modest and humble and when we need to step it up. And Ernest Hemingway says, you can be humble once you've made it. And I think every founder, entrepreneur, business owner needs to hear that because I don't want to say this in a overworking, lose yourself in chasing this ambition and, never stop hustling. Absolutely not. But there is reached a point, particularly in the last year for me, where I can be a bit more humble and I can slow down because I have been shouting from the rooftops everything I've done for the last 7 years. Consistency does pay off. I have been doing that. So jobs do come in easily. This year has felt effortless. And that is what years of self promotion does. It allows you to step back because you are now known.
It's brilliant. That's really inspiring for people listening and watching to hear that. There's probably people in the trenches right now putting in the effort, trying to make change, but it could be quite lonely.
Yes.
And I want to touch on that. I can imagine being a friend of yours, being around you, like, I'm with you now and your energy is magnetic, right? You do make people feel good about themselves and you're putting that energy out. How many people, particularly, it might be another kind of British entrepreneur thing where people put other people down. So you're having a chat in the pub about an idea, or you're having a conversation with a friend, and then the person says, well, what makes you think that would work? Or it's all quite negative. How did you get through that? And have you deliberately attracted yourself to people that are sort of with you and pushing you forward?
It's a really good question. For me personally, it's been twofold. I have surrounded myself with people who absolutely believe in it. And my main goal has been the people who get it. And the people who don't, I'm not wasting my energy on convincing you. Because what I've noticed is in the first few years, everyone's like, self promotion isn't for me. I've got this far without self promotion. I don't really need that. And I'm like, okay, you do you then. That's fine. Like, I am not here to waste my energy on that because I have other people coming up to me being like, oh my God, this is life changing advice. I wish I'd have met you 20 years ago. You have changed the way I see myself. Like, all these beautiful moments where I think, well, I know people are connecting with it. So why waste my energy on people that don't get it, first of all? The second thing is, post COVID and pandemic, and I realized I've talked a lot about it, but my business grew through that period, was job security's gone, loyalty is dead, companies aren't looking after employees. So actually, everybody has realized self promotion isn't optional, it's a necessity. So post pandemic, I have seen such a difference in people being drawn to the message and knocking on my door with the tail between the legs and be like, oh, maybe you were right. Like, do you mind looking at my portfolio on my website or whatever it may be? So I think it's not necessarily about needing to surround myself with people that just, you know, blow smoke or me how wonderful I am. It's more really protecting my energy to focus on the people who need it the most. And that has been the most important thing. I also got featured in a lot of national press at the very start of the business. So the Times wrote a double page spread about me. I was on BBC World News, I was on BBC Radio 1, and then the FT wrote an article about me titled Why Shameless Self Promoters Aren't Welcome in My Inbox. And they basically ripped me to shreds in 3 paragraphs. And it was like soul destroying. And I remember calling my dad and being like, this is awful. Like, this is 3 months into the mission. No one's going to take me seriously. I have been absolutely slammed by a woman journalist in one of the biggest newspapers in the world. And he was like, consoled me. And then a few hours later, my sister called me and she was like, how are you feeling? I was like, she's just not my demographic. Right. And after that moment, I kind of was like, throw anything at me.
Your resilience was building in the fire, basically.
Absolutely. And, from then I've had to endure conversations or interactions that, weren't always amazing, but it kind of was like water off a duck's back for me. It wasn't definitive. So when I speak to my business coach about failures, sometimes I feel like I struggle to bring them out to the surface because I don't know if I've got those really big, deep failures. And something she highlighted to me is that you just don't let other people define what a failure is. Like, in your eyes, it's a lesson, it's a learning, move on to the next. It's innovation, it's experimentation.
Because you do that a lot, right? To get to
Yeah.
where you've got, you've had to go down and you've known when to pivot, you've known when to come back, but that's not failing, that's changing direction, but still always going up.
Like, somebody would argue that FT thing was a massive failure, but I put it in all my talks now when I deliver a talk on imposter syndrome, and I highlight to people, it will never be as bad as this. If I can stand on this stage in front of you all and share this very vulnerably, if I had listened to this critic at this time, I wouldn't be here talking about it. So for me, it's now like this brilliant anecdote that I'm like, I survived this. And I think behind a lot of founders' stories, they've experienced trauma, setbacks, major things that even allowed them to think it was possible in the first place. And I think that strength and that grit and determination is often built off the life experiences that people don't see. I think a lot of people think this all might come very easy to me, and they will absolutely not see behind the scenes how much of a difficult process it's been at different points of my life because I don't necessarily make my life content in every aspect
No,
possible. You know,
and
I'm
that's
allowed to protect that.
yeah,
I do.
that's it's private, that's your business, but it's like it drives you. But I think the humanizing element of you, the 7 years clearly has been graft, and
Yeah.
it's been relentless. So there's a lot talked about in the world of entrepreneurship and founders where it's really early mornings, it's late nights, it's no time for yourself. I'm interested to know how you manage that because at any one time you're working long hours and there's probably been an element of loneliness to what you've been doing as well. How do you sort of manage and prioritize your mental fitness and your physical fitness?
So it's really important, and I also really open about this. When I started my business, I side hustled for 2.5 years, working a full-time job in advertising that was extremely demanding, and running F Being Humble as a side hustle, and writing a book in 8 months. So I did all of that. Now, granted, I didn't have kids and I didn't have other commitments, so I was able to allocate that time. But it was, 6 days a week out of 7, I was working long hours every day. And that process, for me, one of the things for anybody who's on the journey of having to double up at the moment, I would say track your energy levels of what's actually possible at what time. So on a Monday night at 9 p.m., if I finish late at work, I'm obviously not going to try and start writing the book because that would be stupid and I would be spiraling within 10 seconds. So I just broke down like the really small habits that could create obviously long-term impact. So it would be just connecting with people on LinkedIn. Just a quick, I'm watching Love Island and I'm also connecting with people on LinkedIn, just commenting on posts, supporting people. Like, what could I do? And when you actually start to observe where you waste time, it's a massive time giver back, right? Like, you really do, like, okay,
That's a
cool.
conscious effort though,
I
right? So you were
spend
very present to make sure
an
that you were
hour
not.
before work scrolling on Instagram, right? Why don't we actually start saving some posts down that I could reshare? Like, I actually started it in the first place because I knew I had an Instagram addiction and I thought I could really do with channeling this in a more purposeful way, right? And then I think now, as I've grown into a founder and I build a bigger business and I have a lot of requirements and expectations on me, it's also just managing that. So I have a therapist. I do somatic therapy, which for anyone listening that's not aware, it's where you listen to your body kind of more than your mind. So 20% of our body is our head, and we generally listen to our mind, but we ignore all the signals from our neck down, right? And I experienced something, quite a traumatic incident, and I connected to the body, and I ended up disconnecting to the body. And if I'd have gone to talking therapy, I would have talked my way out of it. But somatics therapy is, how are you feeling when you're speaking right now? And I'd be like, my chest is really tight. It feels like someone's stabbing me in the back. Really understanding when I tell certain stories or I share certain things, what is happening in the body. And that has been transformative for me to understand my boundaries, what I'm sharing, when I'm sharing. Am I ready to say yes to that opportunity? Because something in my body is telling me it's not feeling right. Listening to your gut, listen to your intuition. So it's been really amazing in terms of that aspect to it. And the other thing has been really managing schedules. I'm an opportunistic person, and not in a sleazy way of like, oh, how could I get the most out of that? But more, if an opportunity comes, I'm always like, this could be my life-changing event that I
Yeah, you're ready
attend.
for it and you embrace
Who
it.
yeah, who could be there? And I really struggle with saying no, and that has been something I've had to work on over the last year, which is due to the incident I experienced, I didn't have the same capacity that I had. I used to be able to do 3 or 4 talks in a day, which was outrageous, to be honest, and now it really is 1 to 2 max, and I have to protect my rest and recovery time. It's non-negotiable. So now when opportunities come in and I'm already busy, I literally have to look at my schedule and go, "Well, what's coming out then?" Because we're not piling on. Like, that is not how it is. And somebody said to me recently, like, you need people to pay for your recovery time in order for you to show up and shine, because you cannot do what you do every hour of the day. And it was a really important reminder that now when I'm resting, I'm not resting with guilt. I'm actually resting being like, if I want to show up to this podcast today and absolutely nail it, then I need to spend the first half of my day really relaxed,
That's brilliant.
minimal contact. Even things like posting on social media, I wouldn't post today because I'd be obsessing over what the engagement is like. It detracts me. I think recognizing your own weak spots, where do you get taken away in certain situations? Where do you get drained? Where do you feel distracted? And start to really pull out. I'm not perfect. I'm saying all of this as if I've got it teed up, and I haven't. Like, I've been through a really difficult year, and I've had to genuinely reflect on my hyper independence. My struggle with asking for help has been major. my need for holding it together, can't let anybody see the mask fall, can't see behind the brave face, and almost using work as an avoiding space because I preferred being the Stef on the stage than what I was struggling through behind the scenes.
Where are you at
And
with that now?
I am the best I have been
Yeah,
in
I
2
feel that.
years. I feel the
What
brightest.
did you do to get to that point? Because
I
that's
had to
interesting.
grieve the pain. Yeah, couldn't rush it, which was really difficult. So I
'Cause you
read.
like a fast pace, don't you?
Absolutely. I read the book Slow Productivity by Cal Newport, which is excellent. And it literally was like, do less. And I think I just needed the permission. I went to Mexico with my friends in December and it was the new year and we all went around the table like, what's one word we're taking into the year? And mine's always, money, more, travel, whatever. And this year it was less. And I committed to my six like best friends and I said, it's gonna be less. And I really feel like I've embodied that this year, but less asking for help and not seeing it as a vulnerable thing. So, and accepting it, receiving that help, really important. Yeah, doing less. So I've just written a second book and my go-to is like, right, what's the next project? And I just had to sit and say to myself, no, Steph, the project next is just to get that book out there. So Brene Brown, really famously, a lot of people don't know the story, but her first book flopped because she wouldn't self-promote it because she was too worried about what her academic peers would say about her self-promoting.
I did not
So
know.
she spent a year writing a book that actually ended up in bargain bins. She talked about this on Elizabeth Day's How to Fail podcast. And the biggest mistake she made was letting other people question her self-promotional desire to around her book. She actually said, writing it and making the thing is literally 50%. The next 50% is go tell the world about it. And I know that. I've always known that. But I've been too quick to move on to the next thing, to keep churning out. People expect to see an International Women's Day campaign from me, so I must create it. And I had to have a word with myself this year. I was like, no, Steph, you're in the worst place you've ever been. You are not creating a campaign because you have made up a reputation in your head that you think everybody's waiting for this from you. And yes, sitting in that slowness, grieving that, like changing that identity, it has been the most I've cried, the most honest I've been with people, probably the most authentic I've come through as, because one of the things that you have to do is, therapists talk a lot about this, you have to choose between authenticity or attachment. So there are certain relationships or, yeah, mainly relationships where I show up in a certain way to keep the attachment. But whilst I'm on this journey of authenticity, and I know everyone throws that word around and I know it's so overused, but
It's so
whilst I'm
relevant now in this chat. It really
taking,
is.
unmasking and, really revealing who I am, I have to make conscious decisions and learn to sit in them. I went on a podcast recently and they said, what book, film, or piece of art should we watch that would tell me more about you? And I sat for a minute and I felt like I should say something really profound. And I was like, Bridget Jones? Like, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days? And I came away and I was like, God, I sounded so stupid on that. And I text my like well-being friend and I was like, should I have said something like more profound? And she was like, no, like, this is you. This is you being relatable. This is you being honest. She said to me, authenticity is unmasking. And that was, like, really important for me to hear because a lot of people come to me like, how did you make yourself F being humble? And how did you reinvent yourself? And I always say to people, I didn't, I just revealed myself. And I think that's what I'm going on in my journey, which I think every founder does, every business owner, everyone does. But particularly when you run a company and particularly when you've launched something, you're constantly revealing new parts to yourself. Whether you want to accept those new parts is up to you. But I'm leaning into it and accepting it more, and it feels nice to be in my own skin.
Yeah, you can feel that. And that authenticity is the right word to be using for this. And actually, that makes me think in context of whether it's my daughters, people looking at you as a role model, which you are, and the rawness of how you just talked then and being humble in the true sense of the fact that no matter how successful and sort of things you're doing in business, actually there's a human behind all this. But that relentless drive you've got, flipping that back to someone looking at you that's aspirational, what advice would you give them? One piece of advice where they're looking at you going, I want to be like her, but I don't know how to do it.
People are going to make up stories about you, so you might as well try and influence them. And I think we often let life happen to us.
So take control.
take control. Like the biggest learning I had, when people ask me, why did you start your business? I was like, I had terrible bosses that didn't pay me what I deserved. Like, truthfully, I was annoyed. Like, what lights me up is let me prove you wrong.
Because
Like,
so you
true,
were using
very,
pain
yeah,
then
like,
to
let me show you what you should have done differently because you're going to regret the day that you didn't do what you said you were going to do, sort of thing. And I look, I'm being transparent here. I'm not going to give a fake story with it. That inner charge came from the moments of struggle. Yeah, feeling overlooked, undervalued, any of those
but there's a
things.
really positive message there. There's people that are sitting, watching, listening, and they're resentful, they're frustrated, they're angry. You can turn that into a proper positive force of nature, right?
I think it's also about, I people often ask me, are there things you want to tick off, are there things you want to do? And I don't live through that many what ifs. I don't have that many like, oh, I wish I'd have gone for that direction, or I wish I feel like I fully throw myself into things. When I was in New York, I did went to Washington Square Park and I sat with a free career advice sign and offered free career advice to strangers. Now, in my head, there's no way that wouldn't have gone well, right? But for the first 20 minutes, no one turned up. And I had to sit by myself with a sign that said free career advice. The man with 100 pigeons on him was getting more attention than my offer of free support. And my ego was coming through my chest. Like, I was like, this is awful. What am I going to say today? And I just had to have a word to myself and be like, Steph, get over it. Like, you can tell this story however you want to tell it. So I think the storytelling piece is like we have more control over our narrative and our destiny of sorts than we think. And only ever assuming that everybody else controls that is the place where it feels like you're in prison and you're literally like you've got no control. So I think, look, I'm super aware we're going through extremely turbulent employment crises. Things aren't the same. It's not as simple as quit your job and go be an entrepreneur tomorrow. That is absolutely not what I'm saying. What I am encouraging people to have is honest conversations, direct dialogue, set boundaries. If you want changes, they can only come through you. And if those changes can't be met, then you do look at other environments or you look at other ways that you can fill that cup up or you can create that joy that you're looking for. Maybe it doesn't come through your career. Maybe your career really is just to pay your bills and live your life and you find joy elsewhere. But let's not be defeatist about it and assume that this is the only option because it's not. We have never lived through the world with so much option. We have option paralysis, right? So let's just actually be honest with ourselves. I'm quite a tough love agony, Anne. I don't really like sugarcoat it. I think that's why people do like working with me on a one-to-one basis because I will probably say the things to them that their friends or their partners want to say, but they don't want to rock the boat. And I think, truthfully, that's probably in the UK why I have been successful. Whilst people are scared of self-promotion, they want to be humble, they also like directness and they want people to say it how it is. So when I reference Bridget Jones, it probably is because she's a relatable character that is messy and is not perfect, but at least wears a heart on a sleeve and people know where they stand with them.
Yeah.
And that's something I really care about.
A lot of sort of negative press, as you say, which the British do really well.
Yeah.
Actually, standing out and sort of saying as it is, and again, that word authenticity, I think well, I'm craving that. That's a key reason why I couldn't wait to meet you today. And it's just a pleasure listening and learning from you. You mentioned the word success in that last bit. And from a time point, it's probably the last question I've got for you. But sitting here now with the fact that you've got a really successful 7 years behind you and a really exciting future, how do you define success?
I would say it's threefold: a calm nervous system, making sure I feel safe in my body, safe in my mind, safe in my existence, ease. We've been taught that success is about grueling hard work, and the people that have cracked the system are the ones that monetize the skills that come easy to them and don't feel shame around that. So I'm really leaning into that. And especially for the women listening to this, if there is a skill that comes easy to you, charge double, right? Because for whatever reason, we are conditioned to think if it is not extremely hard, grueling work, we can't charge for it or we can't be proud of that being our contributions to the world, and we can. And the second thing is freedom. So freedom has always been a core value of mine. The freedom to pack up, close my laptop and have nobody need to rely on me for the next 2 months if I want to go to Bali. The freedom to say no to things. The freedom to enjoy the moments that I'm in without feeling I've got 100 emails to come back to. So freedom has always been a core value. And, I've always been unsure whether I want kids and buying a home. There are things that I've not checked off on my list because at the core of what I really value is freedom. It's not to say that that can't flex and it can't change, but I'm not in it to make millions and be sell out and sell my company and be on a Fortune 5.
It's
I'm
much deeper
really
than that, isn't it?
it is like it does not bother me. I moved to Paris for half a year and I dropped my revenue and I was living the best time of my life and literally was like life-changingly great. And that taught me it's not the money. If money will come and I know I can always find a way. I have a very abundance mindset. I know what I can provide to the world and how I can serve others. But I know what I need to live a happy life. Everything else is a bonus.
You are so refreshing to talk to. You've been told that you make people believe in themselves. I'm like, I feel like I'm Superman. Like I can go out here now and I think what you're doing is, I've already said it in this conversation, so mission led. It's so needed. And I'm so behind you. And
Thank
you've
you.
made time clearly. And again, like you described earlier, you've clearly sacrificed time earlier to be totally present with me now. And I thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you.
I've
It's
loved
been
talking with
a
you.
lovely conversation.
Thank you.